In this video, I'm going to show you how to take this size large, totally groovy, vintage men's shirt and turn it into a dressy woman's top using this as my inspiration. This shirt was given to me by the manager of the apartment building where I used to live, and one of the ideas he came up with was to have an area in the laundry room where people could leave things they didn't want. So it was kind of like having our own thrift store in the building. One day he came down with an armful of clothes, including this shirt, and asked if I was interested. Of course I was interested, and I've had this shirt for years now, but have never actually worn it. For that, it'll need some work. So let's get started. First, I removed the pockets and the collar by unpicking them. This is made of a chiffon type of fabric with a ribbon detail, which was tricky to seam rip, so I ended up cutting the cuffs off since the sleeves were too long anyway. Then I tried on the shirt and marked how long I wanted it to be. I'm not in love with the batwing look, but since this fabric is so tricky to work with and I wanted to keep the alteration simple, I left the underarm seams intact. After deciding how long I wanted the top to be, I folded the shirt in half at the plackets, added 3/4 inches for seam allowance, marked the length, then cut off the bottom, and trimmed the sleeves as well. Next, I hemmed the sleeve and the body of the shirt. Since this was a tricky fabric to work with, I ironed it on medium heat before sewing. Starting with the sleeve, I folded the fabric about 1/4 inch from the edge on the wrong side and ironed it in place all the way around. After folding the hem over again, I ironed it again and pinned it into place. I repeated this with the other sleeve and also with the hem of the body. Then I simply sewed along the folded edges. Doing a little prep work makes it much easier to sew, especially when dealing with a tricky fabric like this. I continued sewing around both sleeves and then the body of the shirt, starting at one placket and continuing to the other and backtacking at the beginning and end of the seams. The final step was to finish the neckline. I liked the shaggy look of the ribbon detail, so I used the hem fabric to make a seam binding. To determine the length, I measured the neck opening, then added a few inches for seam allowances and for unforeseeable circumstances, of which there tend to be a lot. So my seam binding turned out to be 28 inches long by 1.25 inches wide. I lined up the center of the neckline with the center of the binding and pinned the right side of the seam binding to the inside of the shirt, making sure I had extra on both button plackets. Then I sewed the binding in place, starting at one button placket and going to the other, backtacking at the beginning and end of the seam. After trimming the seam allowance so the seam would move freely, I folded a small hem in the band, ironed it all the way around the neckline, then folded it over the seam and pinned it into place. To sew the end of the binding, I turned it inside out and sewed along the edge of the placket. After trimming the corners and the seam allowance, I turned it right side out and repeated on the other side. On the right side of the fabric, I sewed a seam close to the edge of the fold all the way around the neckline from one placket to the other. And that's it, we're done. And here's the result. Originally, I was going to turn this into a mini dress and then I realized I'd never wear it. But I can easily see myself wearing this top out to dinner or to a party with nice pants or with jeans, depending on the occasion. And when I wear it, it will remind me of its original owner, who was a pretty amazing person. So I hope this inspires you to try your own refashioning project. Thanks for watching and happy upcycling!